In the early 19th century, inside a smoky English workshop, a laborer could spend an entire day earning what it took to buy a small weight of sugar. Not a jewel, not a tool, not a piece of land, but a few pale crystals that could disappear into tea before the cup cooled. Far away, under a tropical sun, men and women were cutting cane so people they would never meet could taste sweetness in a city of fog. That is the strange power of sugar. It is small enough to vanish on the tongue, yet large enough to redraw maps, build fortunes, feed factories, justify violence, and change the way entire nations eat. Today it sits quietly in cereal, ketchup, yogurt, soda, bread, coffee, candy, salad dressing, and almost every aisle of the modern supermarket. It feels normal because it is cheap. It feels harmless because it is familiar. But for most of human history, sugar was neither cheap nor normal. For centuries, sugar was treated like rare medicine, royal decoration, and luxury locked behind counters. Kings displayed it at banquets. Physicians prescribed it as if sweetness itself were a cure. Merchants counted it in ledgers with the seriousness of silver. Then the luxury of palaces became the daily fuel of workers, children, factory towns, and finally, the processed food system that surrounds us now. The question is how a tropical grass became one of the most powerful substances in world history. How did a wild stalk from the Pacific become an obsession in Rome? A prize of Islamic chemistry, a treasure of Venice, the engine of Atlantic slavery, a rival to Napoleon's enemies, the fuel of industry, and one of the most hidden ingredients in modern life. The story does not begin in England or on a Caribbean plantation or inside a glass bottle of soda. It begins much earlier, in a wet green world where the air was heavy with heat. The ground was alive with insects, and a tall grass held a secret that no empire had yet learned to measure. If you like stories where ordinary food turns into empire, trade, obsession, and hidden history, subscribe to Food Empire's History. Now, to understand how sugar became this powerful, we have to go back to where the story really begins. Long before sugar was poured from paper packets, it grew as cane in the tropical landscapes of New Guinea and the surrounding Pacific world. Imagine dense forests, sudden rain, volcanic soil, and plants growing with violent energy. Sugarcane did not look like a world-changing crop. It looked like a tall grass, thick at the stem, jointed like bamboo, with tough green skin and a fibrous heart. The first people who encountered it did not refine it, boil it, or ship it. They cut it, cracked it, and chewed it. Inside the hard stalk was juice unlike ordinary plant sap, bright, sticky, and intensely sweet. Most wild foods demanded work before pleasure. Roots had to be roasted, seeds had to be ground, fruits appeared only in season. Cane offered something faster, a burst of energy hidden inside a walking stick of grass. Sweetness has always spoken directly to the human body. Before supermarkets, sweetness often meant ripe fruit, safe calories, and survival. Sugarcane took that ancient signal and concentrated it into a stalk. A child could bite it and feel strength return. A traveler could chew it on a path. A family could share it after work, not as dessert in the modern sense, but as pleasure pulled from the land. For thousands of years, sugar's first empire was not an empire of kings. It was an empire of hands, teeth, gardens, and migration. Cane traveled with communities across islands and coastal routes into Southeast Asia, carried as cuttings, protected, planted, and remembered. Every new planting was a quiet vote that this grass was worth keeping. Then cane reached South Asia, and the story changed from chewing to transformation. In India, farmers and cooks learned that cane juice could be crushed from the stalk, heated over fire, skimmed, reduced, and cooled into a rough solid. The sweetness was no longer trapped inside the plant. It could be stored, carried, broken, weighed, gifted, taxed, and sold. A stalk rots, juice ferments, a crystal travels. Once sweetness could be made solid, It could leave the field and enter the world of merchants, healers, temples, kitchens, and rulers. India did not simply discover a sweet plant. It invented sugar as a product. And when sweetness became portable, power began to gather around it. In Sanskrit and later Indian traditions, crystalline sugar entered language, medicine, and ritual. It was not yet the cheap white dust of a kitchen cabinet. It was rough, brown, aromatic, and alive with the smell of cane fields and smoke. Physicians used it in preparations for digestion, energy, and balance. Religious offerings could include sweet substances because sweetness belonged to celebration, fertility, generosity, and divine favor. The first great transformation of sugar was status. Whoever controlled crystallized sugar controlled a pleasure most people could not easily produce. Honey existed, but honey belonged to bees, seasons, and hives. Sugarcane could be planted, managed, expanded, and processed. It was not only a gift from nature, it was a crop that could be organized. When stories of this sweetness traveled west, they sounded almost unreal. Greek soldiers and writers who heard about cane after contact with India described a reed that gave honey without bees. To a Mediterranean mind, sweetness came from fruit or hives. A grass that produced honey seemed like a contradiction, as if the field itself had learned the secret of the beehive. For nearly a millennium, Europe desired sugar from a distance. Apothecaries kept it with rare spices. Elite cooks used it carefully, more as a sign of refinement than as a pantry staple. Medieval banquets could include sugar sculptures built to impress guests before they were eaten or destroyed. Sweetness became architecture, a way for power to show it could afford beauty that melted. But sugar's next masters were not European kings. They were Arab traders, agronomists, and chemists working across the Islamic world. Sugar moved through Persia, Egypt, the Levant, North Africa, and southern Spain. Cane fields spread where water could be controlled, and mills turned stalks into liquid wealth. The refining process became more sophisticated. Boiling, clarifying, filtering, and crystallizing improved. Sugar became cleaner, lighter, more stable, and more desirable. In cities of the Islamic world, it sweetened syrups, preserved fruits, balanced spices, and flavored medicines. It belonged to kitchens, pharmacies, and markets at the same time. That mixed identity made it powerful. Then European crusaders arrived in the eastern Mediterranean and met a world where sugar was already cultivated, refined, and desired. They tasted it not as a rumor from distant India, but as a real product in cities and noble households. Soldiers and nobles returned with stories, cravings, and cargo. What had been a rare medicine began to look like a luxury worth importing on a much larger scale. Venice understood the opportunity. The city sat like a merchant's hand stretched between east and west, with warehouses, ships, brokers, contracts, and a talent for turning distance into profit. Raw sugar from the eastern Mediterranean could be brought into Venetian networks, refined, repacked, and sold northward at prices that made merchants rich. At this point, sugar stopped being food and became a system. A spoonful in a noble cup represented ships, ports, middlemen, taxes, mills, fields, irrigation, and political relationships between Christian and Muslim worlds. Every border added cost. Every monopoly added power. Every new craving in Europe made merchants look for a way to shorten the route and control the source. The Atlantic islands became the rehearsal stage. Portuguese and Spanish expansion into Madeira, the Canary Islands, and São Tomé revealed a brutal possibility. These islands had heat, soil, and access to sea routes. Cane could grow there. Mills could be built there. Sugar could be shipped directly into European markets without passing through older Eastern networks. The map of sweetness shifted west. The plantation model began to take shape. Fields were organized around mills because cane had to be processed quickly after cutting. Roads, carts, boiling houses, storage rooms, docks, and ledgers all served the same clock. Once cane was harvested, the juice began to spoil. This urgency made sugar different from many crops. It demanded speed, discipline, capital, and a labor force that could be controlled with terrifying intensity. At first, European planters experimented with poor workers, convicts, and local populations. But sugar cultivation and processing were exhausting, dangerous, and relentless. Planters wanted labor that could be forced, replaced, and calculated as a cost. In that decision, the sugar story crossed a moral line. The hunger for sweetness began to feed directly into the enslavement of Africans. The Atlantic sugar plantation was not just a farm. It was a machine made of land, capital, violence, and human bodies. Cane fields stretched under heat. Cutters moved with blades through stalks taller than themselves. The cut cane had to reach the mill before the juice soured. Animals, water wheels, and later wind power turned crushing rollers. The boiling house glowed with fire, steam, copper kettles, and the smell of hot syrup. To the European consumer, sugar arrived as pleasure. To the enslaved worker, sugar was a schedule that did not forgive weakness. Harvest season could turn days and nights into one continuous demand. Cane cut the skin, mills maimed, boiling syrup burned, disease spread through crowded quarters. The people who created the sweetness were often denied the food, rest, safety, and dignity that the prophets could have purchased many times over. When Columbus carried cane across the Atlantic on his later voyage, he did not carry just a plant. He carried a production system ready to expand into the Caribbean. The islands had the climate planters wanted. European demand was growing. Maritime routes were opening. Indigenous communities had already been devastated by conquest, disease, and forced labor. Into that catastrophe came cane, mills, investors, and the accelerating slave trade. The Caribbean became one of the most profitable and violent landscapes in the early modern world. Barbados, Jamaica, Saint-Domingue, Cuba, and other islands were transformed into sugar zones. Forests were cleared, fields were measured. Mills dominated estates, ports filled with barrels. European ships waited offshore, while plantation ledgers converted human exhaustion into export figures. This is the darkest turn in the story. Sugar did not merely coexist with slavery. Sugar helped make slavery one of the central economic systems of the Atlantic world. The transatlantic slave trade carried millions of Africans across the ocean, and a vast portion of that forced labor-fed plantation economies where sugar was the highest prize. The product was sweet, but the business model was built on disposability. By the 17th and 18th centuries, sugar money flowed into European capitals. It built townhouses, funded banks, insured ships, influenced parliaments, and helped finance wars. The so-called triangle trade moved manufactured goods toward Africa, enslaved people toward the Americas, and sugar, molasses, rum, and other colonial products back toward Europe. The triangle was not clean geometry. It was a loop of appetite, violence, and profit. Britain's relationship with sugar became especially revealing. Tea from Asia and sugar from the Caribbean met in the same cup. The bitterness of tea softened under sweetness, and the habit spread downward through society. A hot cup of sweet tea could feel like comfort, energy, and respectability in a hard life. But that comfort rested on an empire most drinkers never saw. Resistance grew wherever sugar plantations tried to make human beings into machinery. The greatest rupture came in Saint-Domingue, the French colony that became Haiti. It was one of the richest sugar colonies in the world, and it became the place where enslaved people broke the system open. Plantations burned. Armies moved through the same landscapes that had produced France's sweetest wealth. When Haiti declared independence, sugar's empire suffered a wound that shook the Atlantic world. France lost a colony whose wealth had helped support imperial dreams. Napoleon, facing war, blockade, and the collapse of his American plans, sold Louisiana to the United States. A revolution born in plantation country helped change the size and future of North America. A sweet crop on tropical islands helped bend the map of nations. Yet even revolution did not end sugar's power. European demand remained enormous, but wars and blockades made tropical cane supplies uncertain. If sweetness depended on colonies, navies, and vulnerable sea lanes, then a ruler at war needed a domestic alternative. That search led to one of the most important inventions in sugar history, the rise of beet sugar. Scientists had known that certain European beets contained the same essential sweetness found in cane. The challenge was making it practical. During the Napoleonic era, France pushed beet cultivation and processing with urgency. Fields that had never seen sugarcane could now produce sugar from roots pulled out of temperate soil. Laboratories, farms, and factories joined the story. For thousands of years, cane had held the advantage because it concentrated sweetness under tropical sun. Beet sugar broke that monopoly. It did not erase plantation sugar, but it created competition. Europe could now grow part of its own sweetness. The rivalry between cane and beet pushed production upward, prices downward, and sugar deeper into ordinary life. Then the machine age did what empires had tried to do for centuries. It made desire cheap. Steam power improved crushing and transport. Railways moved cane and beets faster. Industrial refineries turned raw material into uniform crystals. Factories could process huge volumes with a precision earlier producers could not imagine. Sugar lost some of its mystery as it gained scale. Prices fell, and falling prices changed behavior. A rare luxury becomes a treat becomes a habit becomes an expectation. By the 19th century, sweetened tea, jams, cakes, candies, and preserves were entering homes far beyond aristocratic dining rooms. Sugar was no longer only displayed at royal feasts. It was spread on bread, stirred into cups, boiled with fruit, and packed into the lunch routines of industrial workers. Industrial capitalism loved sugar because sugar delivered quick energy cheaply. Factory shifts were long, meals could be poor, and workers needed calories that could be consumed fast. Sweet tea and bread with jam were not just comforts. They were part of a new rhythm of labor, where the body had to keep moving under clocks, whistles, supervisors, and machines. At the same time, sugar became a foundation of new brands. Confectioners created candies that could be wrapped, shipped, and recognized. Bakers turned sweetness into standardized products. Bottlers discovered that a sweet drink could become a national habit if it was consistent, fizzy, and advertised with enough confidence. Sugar moved from empire warehouses into logos, labels, storefronts, and childhood memories. A bottle of sweetened soda carried sugar in a new form, portable, branded, and emotionally charged. It could be sold as refreshment, energy, modernity, and fun. Candy bars did something similar. Breakfast cereals, once plain and health-oriented, gradually learned the commercial power of sweetness. The food industry discovered that sugar did not only add calories, it added desire. Advertising completed what plantations and factories had begun. Sugar was no longer presented as a rare treasure or a colonial product. It became happiness, family, celebration, innocence, reward, and normal life. A child did not see cane fields, refineries, tariffs, or lobbying. A child saw a colorful box, a birthday cake, a soda bottle, a holiday cookie, a reward after school. Then came the modern scientific argument over health. For much of the 20th century, public attention often focused on dietary fat as the main enemy. Sugar remained wrapped in the language of quick energy and innocent pleasure. But research kept raising questions about the relationship between high sugar intake, weight gain, diabetes, heart disease, dental decay, and metabolic stress. The debate was not only scientific, it was commercial. The sugar industry learned, as other powerful industries had learned, that doubt can be profitable. Funding research, shaping public messages, emphasizing other dietary villains and slowing regulation all became part of the hidden system around sweetness. Sugar's empire did not end when colonial rule faded. It moved into laboratories, marketing budgets, nutrition policy, and supermarket design. A second industrial twist made the story even more invisible. In the 20th century, especially in the United States, food science found ways to turn cornstarch into cheap liquid sweeteners. High fructose corn syrup fit perfectly into soft drinks and processed foods. It was easy to transport, easy to blend, and attractive to manufacturers chasing scale. Consumers often did not notice the shift. The sweetness remained. The label changed in small print. Cane fields and beet farms were joined by cornfields, enzymes, tanks, pipelines, and tanker trucks. Sugar was no longer only sugar by name. It appeared as sucrose, glucose, fructose, syrup, dextrose, maltose, juice concentrate, and other forms that could hide inside. Products that did not look like dessert. That is the modern shelf, and it is where the whole history returns to the viewer's hand. Walk through a supermarket today, and sugar is not confined to candy. It waits in breakfast cereal with cartoon colors, in flavored yogurt dressed as health food, in bread that does not taste sweet, in sauces that seem savory, in granola bars sold as practical, in coffee drinks large enough to be desserts, and in soda cans cold enough to feel harmless. The genius of modern sugar is invisibility. When sugar was rare, people noticed it. When it was expensive, they measured it. When it was medicine, they respected it. When it became a luxury, they displayed it. Today, because it is everywhere, it often disappears from attention. The most powerful ingredient is not always the one with the strongest flavor. Sometimes it is the one that makes everything else easier to sell. The health consequences are now part of everyday life. Doctors talk about obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, cardiovascular risk, and the difficulty of changing habits in a food environment designed around constant temptation. Sugar is not the only cause of these problems, and history should not turn a single ingredient into a cartoon villain. But sugar is one of the clearest examples of how biology, business, memory, and policy can collide inside the human body. And still, sugar keeps its double nature. It is not only oppression, disease, and manipulation. It is also birthday cake, wedding sweets, festival desserts, tea with grandparents, jam on bread, chocolate after heartbreak, and the first taste of something joyful in childhood. Sugar is not easy to hate because sugar is tied to some of the softest parts of being human. But that softness is exactly why the hidden history matters. The next time you see sugar, you are not only seeing a sweetener, you are seeing a plant carried through Pacific Islands, transformed in Indian kitchens, refined by Islamic chemists, priced by Venetian merchants, displayed by European courts, planted on Atlantic islands, and forced through the brutal machinery of Caribbean slavery. Sugar began as a stalk of grass in a hot green landscape, something to chew for pleasure and energy. It became medicine, luxury, empire, slavery, revolution, industry, branding, controversy, and habit. It built fortunes, it broke bodies, it changed economies, it entered kitchens so completely that it became almost invisible. So the next time you tear open a packet, stir a spoon into coffee, open a soda, pour cereal into a bowl, or squeeze ketchup onto a plate, pause for 1 second. That sweetness has traveled farther than it seems. It has crossed oceans, survived empires, powered machines, shaped cravings, and hidden itself in plain sight. If this story changed the way you see sugar, subscribe for more hidden food histories.